I'm your cult boyfriend. Today we are talking about the superhero film X-Men Days of Future Past. Here you have Mystique, Wolverine, and Quicksilver. Hold on a sec. Yeah, are you sure? The Vampire Diaries season 7, you say? That wasn't the X-Men? It was Damon? Oh, this is embarrassing. Oh, hold on. What the fuck's a Benenzo? The Vampire Diaries season 7 is not a good season. Um, and yes, it feels like the X-Men. This show suddenly feels exactly like a Fox X-Men movie. It feels like a superhero show. The lazy thing for me to do would be to make fun of it, to rake it over the coals, to roast it entirely. That would be lazy and way too easy. And I think there are still interesting things to talk about. I've been loving my time with the Vampire Diaries, and if you think that a bad season means I don't have any insight, you're out of your fucking mind. I think there are still a lot of interesting things to talk about, even though the season fucking blew blew chunks, dude. This season sucks. But let's talk about that. Why? Why did it end up like the X-Men? It didn't even end up like Underworld, right? Like we skipped all of that. Like it could have been Underworld if they really wanted to do something fucking stupid. But we chose X-Men. We chose superhero kind of frameworks. And you look at the larger CW at this time period, 2015 and up, teen drama was starting to become dominated by superhero characters, by the Arrowverse, all sorts of things that included Supergirl and the Flash, things like that. Superheroes also dominated pop culture, completely monopolized all sorts of film and television discussions. And I think if I were being charitable, the easy way to analyze why superheroes, why that wave that we're kind of coming out of now, like this is the death rattle of the superhero. Thank God, I don't have any problem with fads and trends. What I have a problem with is when that trend sticks around for over a decade. It's like, oh, holy shit, man, can we get past this? Like, I feel like superheroes hung around longer than the westerns did, but we're kind of coming out of it now. And the easy way to analyze why superheroes were so impactful in the 2010s probably be along the lines of we're entering like the true digital age, and Americans generally felt pretty powerless in the face of the transparent cruelty of systems and institutions that they can't even begin to comprehend the callousness of. In the information age, transparency is a double-sided sword. Education often comes with disenchantment, and with disenchantment comes bitterness. People did not trust government systems, did not trust institutions, not trust establishments, and hardly trusted themselves. So maybe that gave way to like fantasies of vigilantism or fantasies of messiah figures. Like decent billionaires, maybe. Who knows? It probably also gave way to power fantasies where you think of yourself as the only sane person in an insane world full of injustice. I think people generally felt pretty weak, helpless, and powerless. And they're able to look at characters, like within the Marvel and DC universe writ large, and they were able to identify with them in a large way and feel better about themselves. Because there's a sense of security to interconnected universes too. You feel secure there. It's an alternate universe that's kind of like your own. It's alien yet entirely intimate. There's a sense of security when it comes to media always. And interconnected universes, I think, come with a sense of security. The downfall of superhero kinds of philosophies is that that they foster insecurities. They foster dangerous examples of bravado, extremely simple solutions to massively complicated questions. And also, the superhero genre is far too malleable, far too easy for insidious mega corporations to exploit. Because, like I said, they most likely became so prominent because people felt so weak and helpless, and people who feel weak and helpless are the easiest ones to exploit for financial gain and cultural power. There's a lot riding with the superhero thing, but superhero stuff also completely dominated teen dramas and teen shows in the teen world, and I don't think it's just because that was popular. I don't think it's just because it was everywhere else. Why wouldn't it be in teen shows? Because I think the melodrama and the over heroics of the superhero genre kind of fit a little too nicely within the teen drama scope, which is already exaggerated and melodramatic to begin with. And I don't necessarily think that I think that all kids in a pretty big ways feel kind of helpless and weak. But I think that's always been the case, not necessarily like systemically weak. Like they feel weak because they don't really have a voice, or they're controlled by parents or by their school, or uh, they're starting to realize how small they actually are, like relative to how many people are on the planet. It's simple stuff like that. Now those kinds of fears are being given like a megaphone, and that's when you get to Arrowverse. That's where you get to most of the CW shows, 2015 and beyond. The Vampire Diaries didn't start off this way. The Vampire Diaries took a fucking U-turn and drove as fast as it could to the Xavier School for Gifted Students. Like, this is the X-Men now. These characters are part of the X-Men. It's about superhero team-ups and convoluted bits of lore. It's about sexy people with sexy amnesia. It's like, what the fuck is happening? But I do think the Vampire Diaries is a lot more clever than all of the other things that borrowed from superhero frameworks, and the Vampire Diaries season 7 clearly did. There is a fair amount of melodrama, and there is romance this season, but it is primarily now a show about superheroism. It's a show that has more in line with a comic book than with Twilight, honestly, which I think is a mistake, but I guess it makes sense given the context. And that's where we get into something interesting, because teen shows, I think that art can change its context, but can't necessarily change itself. We can change our context, but we can't change ourselves. So the Vampire Diaries and the teen show as a whole in this exact time period started adopting and started becoming superhero shows. But everyone looked at the CW differently because everyone knew that the CW was still it was still, for all intents and purposes, the WB. It was still teen show proper. The teen show can change its context, but it can't change itself. The Vampire Diaries is still a teen show, but it's trying to completely inhabit superhero visual and philosophical grammar. And the fascinating bits of analysis enter into the arena when we start talking about the characters themselves. They start to become superheroes, right? But they're merely changing their context. They're not changing themselves. So the Vampire Diaries season 7 accidentally, I think, is doing something quite brilliant, which is showing how the frameworks of expression, the frameworks of narrative, are always with a poetic limitation, especially the archetypes within them. It actually exposes like archetypal limitations, which I think is kind of phenomenal, because archetypes are in every form of narrative, and the archetypes we see here in the Vampire Diaries, uh, projection of the past upon the present, in every form of narrative. And archetypes can change their context, but they can't change themselves. And this goes beyond a teen show, goes beyond superhero stuff. We're getting to the core of American shared narrative psychologies. That's awesome. I've never actually analyzed diaries before. I mean, it's called the Vampire Diaries, and when Elena was still around, we'd kind of be grounded by her writing in her diary. Stefan obviously obsessively writes in his own. And in season 7, we have characters like Caroline and Stefan keeping a diary for Elena when she wakes up because she's in sleeping beauty mode. Um, and I've never actually talked about diaries before. I always thought diaries were a kind of illuminating and exposed to just how postmodern we always view our lives, because a diary is episodic in nature. A diary is highly directed and curated in nature. It's you taking your own life, and you don't even have to provide a highlight reel. You don't even have to tell the truth in your diary, right? You just write down where you're at, and it comes off episodically. Television has always been in the blood of Americana. It's always been in the blood of the diary, and a diary is a history of the self, a history of the heart, a history of its wants, desires, needs, and focuses. And diary itself is a fascinating concept, especially when you can extrapolate from that and make it larger. You know, what is the shared human diary? Uh, it would have to be episodic, so it would have to be television. And television, change your context but can't change yourself. The present is a projection of the past. Everything is a representation and not necessarily the real thing. And a diary obviously is a representation of things that had already happened, a representation of feelings that you had felt before but don't necessarily feel now. Diaries are television. The Vampire Diaries, the title of the show, is one of the most postmodern titles I can think of, especially when we include vampirism and vampires, those things that suck the soul and energy and blood and life. From everyone around them. That's how they feed. It feeds off of emotions, feeds off of eroticism, and feeds off of the viscera, off of actual blood and carnage. It's about a diary being sucked dry of its essence, of its narrative. That's what the Vampire Diaries is, a diary being sucked of its own narrative, sucked dry of it. I always really like the vibe of the Vampire Diaries, and the vibe is still like mostly there in season 7. Season 7 was fucking ridiculous. Like, thinking back on it, I'm like, "Oh, this is the same season with the Heretics." We dropped that shit pretty quick and went to some crazy it turned into the X-Men. I'm not being, glib, I'm not being silly when I say that. This season feels like the X-Men, and I don't respond to that very well. I don't think that, general audiences responded to that very well. But this season feels like a superhero show. And, Buffy the Vampire Slayer was also, at least in part, a superhero show. Joss Whedon definitely has a sort of comic book mentality that he applies to his existentialist philosophy, for sure, certainly. But superhero frameworks were very different in the late 90s. In the 2010s, superhero philosophy was how the status quo maintained functionality. Like it's different now. It no longer has that kind of existential zest that it had back in Sunnydale and Mystic Falls. The superhero philosophy, I think, is um, an irritating force of the narrative expectations within the CW at the time. And there were 1,000 different things you could have done coming off of season 6, and turning your show into the X-Men was not one that I predicted. I didn't see this shit coming, but holy fucking hell, Batman. Wow. There are silver linings. I think that Ian Somerhalder and Kat Graham are still firing on all cylinders. I love their dynamic. I love a lot of the things that they do, especially together. Nihilism, sincerity, the nihilism, sincerity of the Vampire Diaries, jockeying for position and dominance, control, and trust uh, for the soul of the show itself. And Bonnie, fucking love you so much. I finally like a love interest that you have. I think that you and Enzo, Bonnie and Enzo are adorable. That episode where Enzo, I think it's a New Year's Eve dinner, and he does all the lights up, and she looks beautiful in her dress, and he's just so charming and suave, and they're hot together, and I buy it, and it really brings out a lot of sensitivities within Enzo. And Michael Malarkey gives a great performance this season, but the relationship brings out a lot of sensitivities within Enzo that I love to see. I love that protectiveness. I love that he loved Bonnie just as much as I do, you know. And I love seeing Bonnie. I think truly turned on and truly in romantic moments and truly feeling love and all of that. I love Bonenzo. I love Bonnie and Enzo. Didn't think I would. Didn't think I did. Didn't even see it coming. I had no idea. But they look remarkable together, and the chemistry is there. I love them together. That is so much better than Jeremy. Fuck you, Jeremy. Enzo. Now that is a fucking boyfriend right there. Okay, Bonnie, we're good here. But you be nice to my wife, Enzo. You be nice to her. I'll fucking rip your heart out, dude. Honestly, it's not really worth talking about much of the specifics of this season because it is just Marvel Comics. It is just the X-Men. It doesn't really matter. Want me to talk about how fucking shit insane Alaric and Caroline were with their fucking twin babies? Want me to talk about how insane that is? It's just fucking stupid. Welcome to Stupid Town, everybody. We finally arrived. It's pointless to talk about these things. I can't even analyze the heretics or Damon and Stefan's mom. There's nothing truly there. It's such a bizarre season. It's just so fucking weird. Like, who in the writer's room went, You know what this should be? This should be the X-Men." Said that? Whose fucking genius, 100,000 IQ galaxy brain idea was that? I don't even blame the show. I would not be surprised if the CW was like, okay, this is what kids are responding to. They're responding to Arrow and Supergirl and The Flash. This is what they're responding to. So your show has to kind of be more in line with the other shows on the CW, so we have like a uniform approach to teen shows and teen dramas. That would make sense, and it also speaks to how television is a fascinating medium because television forces change immediately without much care, for the dignity of the projects that they're forcing the change upon. But like this season kind of proves, I think accidentally, but still proves brilliantly nonetheless, you can change the context, but you can't change it. We can change the context, but we can't change ourselves. Teen dramas, teen shows will always be teen shows. Archetypes, eternal archetypes will always be those archetypes, no matter the context that they're appearing within. These are fascinating topics that the show in its seventh season completely explores and explores to its ultimately convoluted and messy ends. Like it's just such a fucking exhausting mind fuck this season. It's bizarre, and I know that others who worked on the show work in the superhero teen drama art form. I think Caroline Dries, I've seen her name a lot of times in the opening credits of this show, and I know that she was the showrunner of like Catwoman. I know that. So, Vampire Diaries is one of the best shows I've ever covered on this channel because through it, we're able to talk about a lot of things we wouldn't ordinarily get the chance to talk about. Massive changes within the teen drama art form. And one of the most massive changes was how it completely embraced the new superhero philosophy that dominated every part of culture at the time. Completely dominated it. And maybe let's be kind to teen shows. Let's give them a point for once. Let's give them a few points on the competition here. Teen shows kind of proved just how fragile and how ultimately useless, vacant, and vapid the superhero frameworks were. Because they're like, oh, we can make it work perfectly with our shows. You think this is like cool and like masculine and fun and silly? No, 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 no. It's melodramatic and we and we can put that on our shows easily without even trying much. Bonnie and Damon are ultimately carrying the entire show on their shoulders at this point. Bonnie and Damon for life. I love them to death. I've seen people say, like, obviously, when Elena was gone, the show went downhill so fast. Elena was so important. Elena has nothing to fucking do with the drop in quality, okay? Elena would not have saved season 7 from being an objectively bad season. She wouldn't have saved it. It had nothing to do with Elena. It had to do with the turning tide. It had to do with the paradigm shift, with the complete change in how people interact with all forms of media, not just teen shows, but films and literature. It became superhero dominated. It became dominated by insecurities and feeling weak and helpless and wanting to be seen. It became dominated by superhero mentalities. It had nothing to do with Elena leaving the show. Not a fucking thing. It would have still been bad with Elena there. And you can see some of this in season 6 anyway. Some of this stuff was in season 6. It was just it hadn't dominated the general focus of the show at that point. Now it has. Now this show is completely X-Men Days of Future Past and Dark Phoenix and shit. Like now that's exactly what it is. We have one more season of the Vampire Diaries, ladies and gentlemen. One more. You should have been there, B. It was quite a ride. Thank you for watching my video. I'll be back in 1 week to talk about the final season of the Vampire Diaries. I have no earthly clue where we're gonna go in the final 16 episodes. Go literally anywhere. This show is insane at this point. And yeah, the end's in sight. And fuck it, I didn't like season 7, but I've loved every minute that I've spent analyzing and engaging with this show. It's very, very, very rewarding. I love the Vampire Diaries.